And you are at the right place. And this is Kevin with a C, Conversations with Kevin with a C, Kevin Ormond. And today we've got a number of things going on. First of all, we're coming up on Halloween. And all of a sudden, it's December. It's January out. It's colder than a mother-in-law's kiss out there, man. It is colder than a dead Eskimo. I don't know what happened here. They said it's polar air coming down. I don't know. But anyway, whatever it is, it's very unseasonable. We set record low temperatures last night, and it's no bueno. I need to go to Florida or Hawaii or somewhere. I'm done with this already. But anyhow, so as we talk about leadership and we talk about all these things that are going on, there are a lot of different approaches to it. And today I've got a special guest. I've got Tom Gandley, and now he's a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army, and was in the Army Corps of Engineers, and is lives here locally. He graduated from the University of Utah, as did I. I have he's got a bachelor's in economics, and I have an MBA from Utah. My undergrad is electrical engineering from the University of Washington, which means that this week is my no-lose football game, because Utah and Washington are playing. One of my team's going to win. I just don't know which one yet, and so that's a guarantee. So I always have a no-lose football game now. That's always fun, and there's a lot of different things. I spent 4.5 years in the Air Force during Vietnam. I won the draft lottery. It's the only lottery I've ever won. Got an all-expense paid trip into the military out of that. I learned two things. First of all, I did get that all-expense paid trip into the military to go do that. The second thing I learned was to never play the lottery. I've never bought a lottery ticket, and I never will, because you never know what you're going to get. But usually, sadly, lottery tickets in most cases are a tax on the ignorant. But the bottom line to the whole thing is that I spent 4.5 years during Vietnam in the Air Force. I fixed radio equipment. I didn't have my degree yet, and so I was enlisted. And after I got out on the GI Bill, finished the electrical engineering at Washington, and so went to work for Boeing like every other engineer out of Washington. It's like Boeing Prep up there. Designed part of the space shuttle, working for Boeing Aerospace. The part that never broke? That's the part I did. That's the part I designed.
All right.
And so anyway, that's where I come in. And so Tom, tell us a little bit more about your background here, my friend.
Okay. Well, my life experiences have been many, varied, unusual. I'm not from Utah. I came out here to go to the University of Utah in 1981. Originally started out in biology, but it just didn't click with me, and so I went over to business. My dad was an accountant. He worked on Wall Street. Came out here to be secretary-treasurer of a low-capital, or what they called penny stock firm, about that time. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I went to the U of U, was on a tentative track scholarship. I ran track for about a year, and then I decided, after grade school, high school, now in college, I'm like, no, I'm done with the running. I think I'll just go to school.
What events did you do?
I ran the 200 meters, 400 meters, or at that time it was the 220 and the 440.
Yeah.
And the 880 or the 800 meters nowadays. Right. I also ran cross country, but not in college. And I was pretty good at them. That was back in the old WAC conference.
Right.
And I was considered top 8 in the 200 meters, and after 3 hours of training a day, I just was like, this is not worth it. And the U of U was rather inexpensive at the time. I didn't need a scholarship. It was plus you get home, you're tired, and I don't know, maybe I was just a little jaded with it at that time. As I said, I'm from New York, grew up in Brooklyn. And it really developed me character-wise with all the different people that I met. And I just meet different people. You can meet different people everywhere. But the different faiths, the people from different countries. New York is still
New York is a melting pot, and Brooklyn is a fascinating place. It's an interesting place. I've been there many times.
And if you've been there lately, I speak online with a friend of mine I went to high school with, Joe. And he said Brooklyn is not the same Brooklyn it used to be. I mean, when I grew up, it was this, the working class, blue collar type Brooklyn that we see in the old time movies, guys working on the Brooklyn Navy Yard, whatever. He says it's actually become quite hipster nowadays, and the old neighborhoods being gentrified, the dangerous ones being brought up to being actually quite expensive. New York is a place that I'm not sure I can afford to live now.
Well, yeah, and then that's part of the problem. Of course, you're landlocked, and so prices just go up and up and up and up. And the people that can't afford to live in Manhattan then go to somewhere like Brooklyn, where it's a little bit less, but not as much less as we'd like it to be.
Okay. Anyway, moved out here to Utah. Went to the U of U like within a week after moving here, and took me about 5 years to get my 4-year degree.
Sure.
I changed majors, as I mentioned once, and got out, and I wasn't precisely sure what I wanted to do. Went into the military. Like yourself, I didn't win a lottery. I decided to drop in.
Lottery was long done by the time you got done.
And I decided to drop in. And what they offered me, they said, "Well, hey, why don't you stay a while?" And I did. And I started out like yourself, enlisted. And in fact, I started out 4 years in the Air Force.
Did you?
I did. And from there, I went to OCS. By then, I had a 4-year degree. Yeah. After that time was up, went to OCS for the Army. Which was way worse than boot camp. I would not do that again. Boot camp was fun by comparison. And went into the Corps of Engineers. I just remember after taking that MEPS examination, that ASFAB test, I just remember this Marine handing me the results. It was an older gunnery sergeant, and he looked at me, and with that, it had to be from Texas, southern Texas. He said, "Son, that's the highest engineering score I've ever seen."
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's good, because that's the direction I'm going in. And,
yeah. In fact, when I was, like I say, they were going to draft me, and so and of course, now this is pretty much during the height of Vietnam, and so we're taking a lot of casualties, and the idea of dodging bullets in a rice paddy didn't appeal to me very much, and so I went down to talk to the Air Force recruiter, took the Air Force exam, I forget what they call it now, but aced it. And I think that the highest was straight 95s. Whatever it was, I aced it. I got the highest possible score. And of course, the recruiter is salivating all over himself because they don't get people in there like that very often. And what do you want to do in the Air Force, kid? And I'll guarantee you in the contract. They guarantee me electronics, and they follow through.
Okay.
Trained me in electronics, and ended up there. But when I went into to get sworn in, this is in Portland, Oregon. I get sworn in. The major at the swearing in, there's 50 of us or something, and he has me come up in front of everybody, and he hands me the certificate, because I'd aced the test, and that said I'd aced the test, and so then they sent us right on the bus out to the airport and fly us to San Antonio. And the first thing you get there's a shakedown, of course. And so the DI sees this certificate, because I still had it, of course. I'd just gotten it that day. And
it might not be the best thing to bring to boot camp.
Didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
He didn't have a choice. But he saw that. He says, "Is that yours?" And by that time I figured out you're supposed to say, "Sir, yes, sir." So I say, "Sir, yes, sir." He says, "Great." He says, "You're going to be my house mouse."
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I said, "Sir, yes, sir." What is a house mouse? Turns out it was the best job at boot camp.
It's like an administrative assistant.
It was Radar O'Reilly's job. It was the best job in boot camp. I'd make out all the detail lists and accidentally leave my name off of the bad ones, and put buddies together on detail lists, so everybody was happy, and It was, and the dorm chief was the guy who took the heat if things went down, not me. I was the only person who could leave the barracks at will and go down to squadron anytime I chose to.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so, by far the best job in boot camp, as it turned out. So that was great, but that's how it worked.
Yeah, and I remember those days too. And the dorm chief, the house mouse. You know what my job was in boot camp? I was the guy who lined up your shoes under the bed when you went out for the day. I went around with the stick, and I was the
stick and the string, right?
And you had a buddy there who held the other end of the stick to make sure it was straight. Fun.
Yeah, they
times.
had like a chalk line that they'd line the beds up with, and just a string that they'd stretch, and that kind of thing to line everything up. I mean, those of you that have been to boot camp know what we're talking about. Those of you that don't are thinking, what language is this? I get it, but this is there are reasons for this, and there are valuable reasons, as it turns out, why they do these kinds of things. And because if you aren't attentive to detail, the job I was in, I'm around, lethal voltages all the time.
Right.
One mistake, and you're dead. No forgiveness. Boom, you're gone. Mm-hmm. And so, or somebody else is.
Oh, yeah.
And so, as a result, that attention to detail that they drilled into us there, depending on your job, was very crucial. I mean, a guy who's handling ordnance, all of a sudden you got bombs and rockets cooking off on the flight line. That's not good. So,
right, of course. And now you were electrical, and now were you in the engineer squadron when you were in?
I was in the communications squadron.
Okay. See, I went into engineers immediately.
Yeah.
As I said, the test scores and what have you, and they assigned me as a little. I think it was an E3 out of boot camp because I had a few years of college and what have you.
Yeah.
And I got assigned to two things. One was I was the NBC soldier, the guy who used to do the old tests and make sure the air is okay to breathe after a potential chemical attack.
Right.
And then I got moved into explosives and demolitions.
Sure.
Because engineers, you have to do things like this
right.
when, let's say you have to rubble something in base denial, or let's just say you had to rubble an airstrip.
Sure.
The airstrip is in the Air Force.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And then, of course, as I moved on to the Army, same thing. I went in, and at that time, we almost don't do this. It's practically an archaic or an outdated art, is the minefield.
Oh, yeah.
With precision-guided munitions, nowadays close air support, satellite surveillance, when the enemy's on the move. The minefield is practically something that has run its course of usefulness.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's still a lot of them out there.
Well, we went to Iraq. They estimated, until the leadership said, we figure there's about 9 million landmines out there. Now, can you imagine this? And Afghanistan was the same way because the Russians were there.
Of course.
They were big minefield users. This is one of those things that I've been in the middle of a minefield before, but because of the training, I was never worried.
Yeah.
I knew that if we did things right, we'd get out of that minefield just fine.
Sure.
As we were what they call reducing the obstacle.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, anyway, so at the end of the day, that kind of a background, obviously you were in there long enough and rose in the ranks to lieutenant colonel before you retired, and so leadership became an issue that became more and more. Now, obviously, I was a tech sergeant when I got out. And so leadership was something that I had to deal with, at that level too, because obviously, as an E5, there are people working for you, and so that was something that I had to learn a bit about at that time as well. Of course, I didn't stay in that long, but nonetheless, I did go through some of the basic. Type of training that they do for that as you advance in rank. So, we were talking earlier before we started recording about leadership and leadership-related issues.
Right. How do you define leadership?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and why don't you just kind of posit a little bit about what you were talking about earlier, and we'll go from there.
Well, I think one of the things we discussed is what is the difference between management and leadership. There is a profound difference between, management is, based on most definitions, utilization of resources. How do you do that? And you can be very, very good at that type of thing, while nevertheless being a quiet guy in the background, somebody who does not step up to a leadership position, which is fine. The world needs folks like that.
You bet.
How do you compare, let's just say, a corporate manager with a one-star general, okay, a lower-ranking general? Let's just say a full colonel nowadays, who is a brigade commander.
Sure.
Okay, what is the difference between...
For our non-military people, how many people are in the brigade?
Well, it depends on the brigade, but you can count on being in charge of, at least at this stage of the game, 1,900 to 2,200 people, and that is a small brigade. That is a light brigade.
Exactly, and so so it is a significant number of folks that you're responsible to direct.
Yeah, think of being in charge of a biggish corporation.
Yeah, that size of a company is probably in the 100 million range, probably. So. Yeah,
and. Anyway, well, what is the difference between the two? And it came down to a terminology that we brought up, and you hear it a lot if you're in the military or anywhere else for that matter, is command presence. What is the difference between command presence and just knowing that somebody is in charge of something? Well, there is a qualitative difference between one and the other. And you can have all the managerial skill sets you need to effectively move forward. But without that command presence, especially in the military, and you even brought up that in the corporate world, there has to be an element of command presence as well amongst the top ranks, the leadership, that exudes confidence, that it has to be a contagious confidence. That, and they told me this when I was a second lieutenant, right out there, is that you may come time, Lieutenant Gandley, when, and what was I, about 25, I guess, 25, 26.
Yeah.
So a young man, and most of the men in my platoon were older than me.
Yeah.
So what are they going, and have been in the job too for a long time, at least more years than me. What is it that I am going to have, or I'm going to have to make them feel confident that under my management, my leadership, that they are willing to follow through on the operation that we have? And what is it that I have? And I was told by the captains and the majors and the officer training that we went through, that everybody in the military goes through, that as a lieutenant, a first lieutenant, second lieutenant, there may be times when you are pinned down. And at this time, think that, the war in Europe was the reality, us versus the Russians, or at least the Soviet Union at the time.
Right.
And you may be pinned down. You may be taking fire. What are you going to do? Are you going to sit in your foxhole and wait for it to end? No, you've got to get up under fire, and you've got to tell that 17-year-old with the weapon, you got to fire back, son. Yeah. Okay? What is it that separates a guy like that from a CEO? Now, I think at that point there is a huge qualitative difference, because
it has to be.
Because
your life's on the line.
Your life is on the line. Now, as you mentioned yourself, you may be in the corporation. If you don't like the CEO, you walk out, or at least your immediate manager, let's say, and you walk out. Yeah. They're going to let you walk out. Yeah. They're going to say, well, there's somebody out there who could probably do your job as well. We'll find them.
Well, whether they do or not, they can't stop you.
And exactly. Yeah. And in the military, however, you do something like that, well, there are summary punishments.
Yes, there are.
Although the odds of you going to the firing squad are probably kind of long, I'd say nowadays.
Yeah, these days it's a less common thing. However, doing a lot of bad time in the stockade is a very real possibility.
Yes, the U.S. disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Precisely. Yeah. Call it what you will. But
disciplinary barracks.
Let me tell you something about. I'm just gonna take an aside here.
Please go right ahead.
Okay, political correctness is what George Orwell called newspeak. It is a control mechanism, and nobody is going to control my vocabulary. And if they don't like it, they can lump it. I really don't care, because their opinion of me is their business, not mine. I can't control it, therefore it's not my business. So the bottom line is that that I will not, fall into line with that. And so when you start talking about euphemisms, like you just like they've renamed 11 Fort Leavenworth, things like that, I just say, okay, right. You call it what you want. I'll call it what it is. And and the bottom line to the whole thing is, and we can take that into all kinds of arenas that you see in the media and all this other kind of in politics and all this kind of stuff. Look, if you're going to get your knickers in a twist about something, that's your problem, not mine. I don't care. Because it's out of my control anyway. Now, am I going to deliberately be mean, deliberately whatever? Not usually. If you start it, I will finish it. But I'm not going to generally start there. Okay.
No.
And so the bottom line to the whole thing is that as a leader, okay, if I'm the leader, I'm the guy defining the terminology. You see, he who defines the terminology controls the discussion.
Right.
And so if I'm the leader, I'm defining it. Okay? And I've gotten to the point in my life now where I'm a leader everywhere I go. That's just who I've decided I am. And because of that, I define the terminology. And if you don't like my definition, you've got several options, okay, including walk away. And that's okay. That's your business, because if you're that sensitive about it and that fragile, you probably don't belong on the bus that I'm driving.
Okay.
And and so why don't you do us both a favor and go ahead and get off the bus and go find one that works for you, because mine may not, and that's okay.
Right.
I don't need everybody. I just need the right people. And so the bottom line, and that's true. I fired clients for the same reason, not just employees. Okay, you have to, because at the end of the day, I am not gonna waste my time and energy walking on eggs for somebody else's unwillingness to take responsibility for their own feelings.
Right. And I mean, one thing comes to mind, just to bring an aside that you just brought up.
Sure.
Is
I love rabbit holes. We just go down the rabbit hole. We have a great time.
And that poor rabbit, we're coming his way.
Okay, let me pause you for just a moment so that we can take a station break, and then we'll come right back.
I'm author Richard Paul Evans. Several years ago, I asked author Mary Higgins Clark the secret to her success. She said, "Richard, I try to make every book my best. I've tried to do the same. My readers deserve that. And sometimes magic happens. I think you're going to love my new book, Noel Street." My agent cried 9 times. Even the woman recording the audiobook had to take breaks because she couldn't stop crying. Noel Street is the story of a mother's love and forgiveness. I can't wait for you to read it. That's Noel Street, on sale November 5th.
Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld of The Brad Neufeld Show, right here on 5 Kingdoms Radio. Tune in Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time to hear tips and strategies on how to overcome the challenges of life. You'll be glad you did.
You are listening to 5 Kingdoms Radio, the station that helps you increase order and magnify your kingdoms.
And we're back. So we were talking about now going down a rabbit hole and doing a few other things. So go ahead, Tom.
The thing that came to mind when you were mentioning that, and I like yourself, I avoid the euphemisms. I am a hard-hitting person. I will say what it is. The first thing that comes to mind is, what do you think of this push, and particularly in Canada, was these gender-neutral pronouns. They're changing the verbiage, changing the definition of what it means to be.
Well, you started out in biology. I mean, let's get real. I mean, You either XX or XY. I mean, that's it. Okay, and that's just the bottom line. And all the rest of this stuff is unfortunate. And I feel bad for people who are truly troubled with this. Okay, there are some people that are
They're struggling.
They're struggling. They're emotionally, mentally, whatever the situation is that's causing their struggle. I don't know what it is. It's probably different for each one. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is just created by the media and too much noise about it, rather than compassion and kindness to people. I mean, at the end of the day, why can't we be respectful and kind to one another? Why do we have to, because I don't agree with you now all of a sudden you call me all these names, okay? Or I don't agree with, or you don't agree with me and I call you names. I mean, what's the value in that? I don't see it. And so at the end of the day, I think it's more about let's deal with what's real. Number one, first and foremost, you cannot. Look, reality is reality. You can't do anything about that. All you can do about it is say, okay, here's where I am. Here's what it is. What am I going to do now? You can make a decision and move forward from there, but you can't change the reality of the way things are.
And exactly. And I mean, I don't understand why. I mean, there's no need to be catty or hateful on people. No, not at all.
No, that's not what I'm advocating at all.
Oh, no, and nor would I.
Yeah.
And but the point is, and one thing that is particularly insidious about what we just said is that they are trying, and were practically successful at doing this, that if you did not or refused to use these gender-neutral pronouns, you could be essentially ticketed. You could be given a $50 fine.
Yes.
That, well, these are people who are trying to control the narrative. They have, put themselves in a leadership position.
That's right.
That I think is guided primarily by hate. I really,
not only that, but it's totally hypocritical and self-serving. Because they say it's about compassion, but it's not about compassion. It's about them being on top and being in control of everything,
Precisely.
including how I speak. Well, I'm sorry, but there is a thing called the First Amendment where I have the freedom to speak, and we're doing it here. And if people don't like what I'm saying, they can switch channels.
Precisely.
They can leave the bus. I don't care, because that's not they're not my crowd anyway. Okay, and they'll the right ones will self-select in, and the wrong ones will self-select out, and they'll go find somewhere where they're comfortable, and that's great. Okay, because the problem with truth versus BS, okay, is that. When you start speaking truth to someone who's full of BS, okay, it makes them very uncomfortable.
They throw their hands up and start screaming.
Because they can't refute it. They don't have. See, I've talked about this before. There is no such thing as my truth. Okay, I talk about that in my latest book, The Constitution of a Great Leader: Leadership in the 21st Century. And truth has two defining characteristics that I talk about in here. Number one is it's timeless. It was true yesterday, it's true today, it'll be true tomorrow. So if I use the law of gravity as an example, I'm holding a pen above the ground. Above the table, if I release it, what's it going to do, Tom?
It's going to fall to the table.
Okay, now will it float?
No.
Ever? Will it ever go to the ceiling?
Not in this time.
Not if I just release it. Will it go sideways into the wall? What will it do if I just simply release it?
No, it is going to drop. I've done it many times myself.
Every time. Was that true yesterday?
Oh, it's always been true.
Yeah. Will it be true tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, so it's timeless. It's independent of time. The second thing is, does gravity care what I think about it?
No.
So it's independent of opinion. Okay, so you can say, you can step off a building and say, I don't believe in gravity. I don't believe in gravity. I don't believe in gravity. Spat. And you can not believe in gravity all the way until you hit. Okay, no. and then I don't know what you believe because you're not here anymore. But at the end of the day, truth has those two characteristics. Everything that's true has those two characteristics, and that is it's independent of time. It's independent of opinion. And so there's no such thing as my truth. You don't own the truth. The truth owns you. Okay, I am subject to gravity. Period. Always.
Right.
Okay, it owns me. And I don't own it. And so at the end of the day, true principles are all like that. And so when we start talking about this, when people are trying to take away your liberty, okay,
right,
which is what's really going on.
Right.
I mean, look, you sacrificed 20 years of your life. You didn't give your whole life, but you gave 20 years of it to allow people to have liberty and free speech and all these things. I gave 4.5 years of my life. And many people that we've both been acquainted with gave the whole thing. They're not here any longer.
Correct.
And and it's dishonorable to that sacrifice, to your sacrifice, to my sacrifice.
It's a betrayal to that sacrifice.
It is a betrayal, and it's totally hypocritical to then use that free speech in an abusive manner. To the degree that we're talking about. Okay, so at the end of the day, that's a very critical thing, because let's circle back for a moment. Suppose I'm a leader and I'm trying to do that. Am I really a leader?
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. Now, I may be in a position of leadership. I may be in a position of power.
Yes.
Okay, does that make me a leader?
No, you do something like that, and you've gone over the lines of being an autocrat. You've gone over the lines of being a tyrant.
Of course, or a dictator,
yes,
or a despot, or something. Okay, but at the end of the day, that is not leadership. And anyone who thinks it is sadly mistaken. That is not what leadership's about. Because at the end of the day, my job as a leader is to influence. My job as a leader is to invite. My job as a leader is to guide. My job as a leader is to set a vision, and then to help my people see how reaching this vision also satisfies their goals individually. I got to know what their goals are to help them do that. And so there's a whole lot of skill set involved in this to do it properly. That is far beyond position, and far beyond coercion, and far beyond management. It's just it's a very different kind of a thing. You feel great leadership, and you feel poor leadership. It is experienced, in the heart. You don't see it. For example, leadership's like the wind. I look out the window and I can see trees going back and forth. What do I know?
Well, the wind's blowing.
That's right. But am I seeing the wind, or am I seeing the effects of the wind?
No, you're seeing the results.
I'm not seeing the wind. You can't see the wind.
Right.
And in fact, you don't experience it. You've got to experience it to understand what the wind is.
Right.
So have you ever been in a typhoon?
No, but I've been in hurricanes.
Well, okay, same thing.
Yeah.
And so just different area of the world. Have you noticed the different characteristic of that kind of a wind as opposed to a normal wind?
Yes.
It feels entirely different, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. If you have not experienced it, you don't quite understand it, because it is experientially learned. And so leadership is like that. It is experiential, as opposed to intellectual. And you can't train it, because it's technical skills, management skills are trainable. They start as an intellectual exercise. Leadership doesn't do that. Leadership is about your core and who you are. You have to change who you are to become a better leader. And that is a much slower process. It's a much more difficult process. It's a much more long-term, more like a marathon as opposed to a sprint kind of a process. And so at the end of the day, that's where we want to go with this, is into those spaces.
Right. Yeah. And once again, it's the communication of experience and knowing that, like you just mentioned. Okay, if I can make another comparison, one of those Middle Eastern dust storms, they just show up out of nowhere. You don't know what comes. The closest thing we've got to them here in Utah is like a dust devil.
Yeah.
They just poof. They just go, and they're next thing you know, you see this. Well, they are huge over there, and the thing is, if you are in one of them and it's bad enough, and usually they are, you've got to cover your eyes, hold your nose, basically hold your breath, or find something to breathe through until it passes.
Yeah.
Well, what do you feel like when you're like that? Well, you're vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? If you're in the middle of something, of a hateful storm, like a hateful leadership, what do you do?
Yeah.
and until it passes, and then of course the residue is left behind as well.
Of course.
You
The damage.
And what does it take to undo that? Poor leadership it will extend into the future long after the leader is
So
gone.
good leadership.
And precisely, all of it will. How does it affect the future? One of the things we talked about before we went on air was also the comparison of the coaches. Okay, the Chicago Bulls coach of the 1980s and 90s, Pat Riley, L.A. Lakers. When they were gone, what happened to the teams? Well, we all know what happened to the Bulls. They became another team. They were not the invincible 6 losses a season type deal.
Yeah, right.
That leadership. What was that leadership like? I don't know. I never played in the NBA.
Yeah.
I don't think any team would have me anyway. But it's very.
I need to
very,
have Mark Eaton on because he obviously did. He still holds the block shot record.
And that's there's a technical ability he had, but unless he was managed the right way by Frank
talks
Layden.
about that. He talks about. I think it was.
The four.
I think it might have been Wilt Chamberlain, or it was either Wilt or Kareem, one of the two. I think it was, or maybe anyway, Bill Russell. I don't know. One of the big centers anyway, who was very good and was ahead of him, had seen him play, and he says you don't understand what your job is. And he said, your job is defense, not offense. He says that's what you need to be doing, and Mark talks about how that shifted his whole career, because then he could understand. Then and like I say, and he still, I don't know, 25 years later, still holds NBA records based upon that.
During one season, I remember seeing the stat that. Hakeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson, they referred to them as the Twin Towers. They were both 7'4".
Yeah.
And once I think Mark Eaton is also 7'2" or
7'4". Yeah, he's 7'4".
And he exceeded the block shots of the two of them combined.
Oh, I know.
In a single season.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Now was that word the word of advice that came from? Well, we don't know who it came from.
I don't remember which
Wilt
one.
Chamberlain. Was that a tipping point that gave him?
That's what Mark says. Yeah, I've heard him say that, and so it's a it was a very powerful one of those moments of a change of direction that redefined his whole career, and in a sense his whole life, I'm sure, and these kinds of powerful things are the kinds of things that leaders do regularly, good ones. They'll do something that will change your life forever, for good or ill. Depending on whether the leadership's good or bad. Now, that being said, that means there's a tremendous responsibility that the leader holds, tremendous power, and sadly, too many people utilize that power for self-aggrandizement and other reasons.
Oh, I've seen it a lot. I've seen it a lot.
I mean, look at the news. Look at politics. Look at the media. Look at many corporation. People in corporation. Lots of places that you go, you see this. You see it in the military. You see it everywhere. It's and that's poor leadership, is what it is. There's no question about it. We could use a lot of other four-letter words to describe it, but it's but it is poor leadership.
And right. And I don't know whether that comes from somebody's desire to actually be like a bully with people.
Sometimes,
or if it's and I've seen people who in the military who through the course of their careers. Most folks are stable. The way they are the day they get in is the same way they are the day they get out. But when in a leadership position, is it something to placate some failure that they're trying to cover up?
That's right.
They're trying to, be a loudmouth and be a bully because they are deficient in some other way.
Or at least in their own mind they are.
And precisely.
Yeah, because very often it's not based on any reality other than their own self-perception.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen 2 full colonels screaming their heads off at each other in front of 400 troops.
Right.
They could not agree with something. Well, one guy I always thought of as being a very good leader, and the other one I had plenty of doubt about. And I'll tell you, that is a bad thing to do.
Of course
in
it is.
front of the troops.
Of course
I
it
mean,
is.
that creates a lot of doubt.
It's
That
a bad thing to
creates-
do. It's a bad thing to do anyway.
No.
But particularly in a public setting.
Yes. Oh, and this was very public.
Yeah.
This was on the drill floor.
Oh yeah.
Red faces and everything. I
Oh,
mean,
sure,
I
sure.
had to turn away. I mean, I could have gotten in the middle of it and said, "Look, guys, this isn't the place for it."
Yeah.
But I had to walk away.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it. I think
Yeah.
they both outranked me anyway. So
Yeah, well,
I was like,
yeah.
"What's that going to come?"
Yeah.
to? But leadership is one of those things that it's like you mentioned. It can be nurtured. It can be engendered.
It's a skill set.
You're born with it.
No, well, you're born.
I-
Listen, there's no such thing as a born leader. Everybody's born a baby. Nobody's born a leader.
No.
Okay, But what there is that everybody is born with different talents and different propensities.
Right.
Okay, and some of those lend themselves to great leadership more than others. Okay. However, anybody can develop skills if they're willing to pay the price. And pick a Michael Jordan. Okay, so he's undoubtedly one of the very greatest basketball players that's ever lived. Okay, and had an extreme level of talent. Okay, but was that sufficient? Not at all. He had to practice and practice and practice.
Mm-hmm.
He had to do all the work in addition to that.
Yeah.
Okay. And, Tiger Woods is another one. I mean, he just won his 82nd. He's tied Sam Snead, I think it is, who with 82 wins now.
For the most,
for
major
the
tournament victories.
Most tournament period victories, not majors. That's still Jack Nicklaus's, but in terms of tournament victories, he is now tied number 1. He wins another one, and he's the all-time. But and the way he's playing right now, he's likely to do it this year. But at the end of the day, if he hadn't worked and worked and worked, and he's come back from injuries. Jordan did the same. All of them. They come back from injuries. They come back from losses and disappointments and all kinds of things that go on. And that's the thing that we all have to do. The other thing to recognize is that
as you're talking about self-mastery,
it is.
How do you come back? And I guess, yes, leadership is an element of self-mastery, one that you have to develop.
You have to start. It starts with self-leadership at the core. And if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others effectively. And as you start to lead yourself more effectively, then you have the ability to start to lead others more effectively.
Okay. And it does happen. People look up to you for your aptitude at certain things. It will happen whether you want it to or not.
That's right.
So that's why when you hear people say, you hear Madonna say, "Well, I am not a role model." Well, I'm sorry, lady, you are a role model.
Yeah.
Your very behavior in the public forum is going to be emulated or admired, maybe not emulated, but definitely admired as some kind of leader. You are somebody who has put yourself in that position, and you can't dodge what you are.
No.
For instance, I'll give you an example. The one thing that didn't come up was for many years, I was a competitive fencer.
Oh, wow.
And I was North American Cup. I've medaled several times. And I had one old-time coach. He's passed on now.
Was that saber or was it?
Tried saber. I actually qualified for nationals in all 3 weapons.
Did you?
I started out in foil, went to saber, finished up in épée, which is my first love. If I were to go back to fencing today, I'd go back to épée. There's an old saying that, let me see if I can get this right. Saber is theater, and épée is truth. Foil is theater, saber is, épée is truth. And the reason épée is truth is because there are essentially no rules. You hit the other guy first, you get the point. There's no right of way. There's no who's pushing the attack and whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's not what I'm talking about here. As I got better and better at it, okay, as my national ranking increased, I'd have little kids come to me and say, "Hey, can you help me out with this? Can you help me out with this?" I was never a coach.
Yeah.
The coach was the coach. You knew who the coach was. He was dressed in black. His name was Kenny, and he was superior at it. But people will start to follow you when they see that you are. And I was an old guy. I went, okay, overcoming life's adversities. My wife passed away, and I saw my swords there, and I said, I'm giving this one last shot.
Sure.
Before I'm too old to do it.
Sure.
And I developed it with my coach, and that was the personal aptitude. That was the Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
That was the Michael Jordan practicing shot after shot after shot.
Yeah.
And the development I saw in myself, even at the age of, by then it was 46, 47, 48 years old.
Yeah.
And being able to lick guys half my age.
Oh, sure.
It's for whatever reason, people came to me and asked questions. They were like, well, what did I do? Hey, will you fence with me? Mm-hmm. People I didn't even know at North American Cup. They'd come to me, there's folks I'd never seen again. This leadership, this endowment you give yourself, if you develop that, the be no do, as they say in the military. I don't know if you remember that or not. Be the leader, know what the leader knows, and do what the leader is expected to do.
Right.
Okay. It will fall upon you.
Oh yeah.
And you if you want to be at the top, you're going to have to do the things.
Well, yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. Look, if you're a millionaire, people are gonna talk to you because they want to become a millionaire. If you're an actor, they want to talk to you because they want to become an actor. If you're an author, they want to talk to you because you want to be. I get people talking to me about that because I've written 5 books. I help people do their own books, and usually in 100 days or less, I can help somebody with not even a manuscript to have a book out the door. But because I'm a heck of a project manager,
and I believe that, and I get the same questions about.
I've done that.
I get the same questions asking me guys at work, these young men in their early 20s. What do I need to do to join the military? Well, to join, what do you need to do to join? Go down, sign on the dotted line, and you're in. But because they know my history, my reputation, and my rank, I carry that credibility.
Exactly.
And they're going to come after
me.
Well,
yeah. I've spoken at over 4,000 events worldwide. I've got over 30,000 hours up in front of groups of people. Okay, so people will come up to me and ask for advice about how to speak, how to be an inspirational speaker, how to be a keynote speaker, how to be a leadership expert, how to do all these things, because I've spent well over 30 years developing the skills, and so 30,000 hours is a lot of time.
Yeah, it is.
And so I've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, basically the man in the arena that long. If you remember the Teddy Roosevelt man in the arena thing, but the bottom line to the whole thing is that just because of that, they will come up to me. Sometimes people come up to me because I've been married to the same woman for over 41 years. And they'll say, how did you do that? It doesn't, but see, the bottom line is any accomplishment, any level of accomplishment, once people find out about it, is going to have, some people are going to want to know how, and yes, you are a role model. There is no getting out of it. So here's the reality. Everybody is a role model at some level. Get over it, suck it up, and just realize that's how it is. Whether you like it or not is not relevant. Okay, what you do with it is entirely up to you. Okay, but are you going to make the world a better place or a worse place? Because those are your options. And I'm gonna take a break based upon that, and we'll come back here shortly.
Thanks.
You are listening to 5 Kingdoms Radio, where we inspire you to organize and align your life so that you can build a better you, a better family, and become a better friend and associate so that you can ultimately bless the world. If these are your goals and you want to help us build this life-changing network, we invite you to become a sponsor or advertise on our station. For more information on this amazing opportunity, please contact us at 5kingdomsradio.com.
Hello everyone, this is Brad Neufeld, host of the 5 Kingdoms Radio Show. Be sure and tune in every Monday through Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on our website, at 5kingdomsradio.com. That's the number 5, kingdoms with a Y, radio.com. Thank you and have an awesome day.
And we're back again. I'm here with Tom Gandley, and we're talking about leadership. In particular, we've been talking about it, from the perspective of the military. He
Yes.
spent 20 years.
Actually, more than 20 years, but
How many?
grand total, if you want to throw in Guard and Reserves later on, because I finished up my days actually as an instructor at military Army University. Probably 32.
32 years. Okay.
Grand total.
Oh, 32 years. I did 4.5, and so I did enough to not be a total rookie, but not nearly to the level that you did, and in that arena. And so we've been talking about leadership and leadership-related issues, and how this all ties in, because ultimately we are all leaders. Okay, you're always a role model. Anybody who says I'm not a role model is irresponsible.
Yeah, it must be.
They're
Yeah,
irresponsible. That's all it is, because the fact of the matter is that you are a role model, and particularly if you've achieved notoriety or some level of expertise in anything.
Yes.
Okay, then you are going to be a role model in that arena. So, for example, if I wanted to learn something about fencing, you would be one of the first people I would talk to. Why would I do that?
Because of my previous national ranking and my, like you said, thousands of hours of
and so
training.
when I was stationed in Guam, my roommate, there were 6 of us in the barracks room, okay, and one of my roommates was nationally ranked chess player, okay. And so what did I do? I played him and got beaten again and again and again and again and again. He loved to play all the time, and I played him often, okay. I finally figured out his style and got to where I could beat him about once in 5 or 6 times. Okay, because he was strong with his knights, and so if he could take his knights out early, he had a chance. Okay, that was his real strength, and so but after that,
there's more to it than just that. But
of course, but after getting beat that many times and playing him that many times, okay, when I came home, there were very few people in my circle that could ever beat me.
Right.
Okay, not and I never jumped through the hoops to get any kind of a national rank. I had no interest. But the bottom line is, I got better. I got a lot better.
Oh yeah.
Because I learned what I had done wrong, and see, this is the thing. No leader is perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. Okay. Right. We talked a little bit earlier that your impact as a leader can extend way beyond your lifetime. Way beyond your position time, and
unquestionably,
and there's no question that it does that. And since nobody's perfect, we're all going to have those off days or those screw ups or those things that we all. It happens. People talk about there's a fascinating difference. Here we are, Game 7 of the World Series coming up, right? Okay.
Yeah, tonight.
Yeah. This is the first not just World Series, but the first 7-game series in professional sports where the home team has not won a game in 6 games.
I heard that.
It's never gotten this far where they're at a 3-3 and the home team has not won once. Okay.
Yeah, that is odd.
This is the first time. And if Washington wins tonight, they'll have a whole series where a whole 7-game series where the home team lost every game. And now, will that happen? I don't know. We'll find out tonight. But they still have set a record with 6 games and the home team not winning. So here's the deal: baseball is a failure-based sport. Okay, if I fail at bat 7 out of 10 times, Major
Right.
league pitching, 98-mile-an-hour fastballs, and I
Right.
fail 7 out of 10 times. I'm making millions and millions of dollars, and I'm playing tonight.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm 70% failure. Okay?
Right.
Baseball is a failure-based sport. Golf is a recovery-based sport. You know, every golfer, the best golfer in the world, makes bad shots. They put it in the trees. They put it in the water. They you know, whatever.
Yeah.
They shank one. You know, I've seen the best player in the world shank it. You know, barely get past the ladies' tee. I mean, you know, every player in the world makes bad shots
Right.
in golf. Okay.
Yeah.
The really good ones don't make 2 bad shots in a row.
Right. Well,
Their next shot is this magnificent recovery shot or appropriate recovery shot or whatever else. See, so golf is a game of recovery. It's based on recovery because that's how you win at golf, and that's how you score. Is when those bad shots happen. You try to minimize them, but at the end of the day, you're going to have some. When you do, you just don't do 2 in a row. And at that level, it's rare that once in a while they'll do 2 or 3 or 4 in a row, and you'll see somebody get an 8 or a 9 or whatever on a hole. But that doesn't happen often.
It does, and I like that observation too. A recovery-based sport. If you
So
I don't know if
leadership
you're-
is, my point is
yeah.
leadership is a recovery-based sport.
Yes.
Because you're going to make mistakes. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say that the movie Legend of Bagger Vance, which is about golf,
absolutely.
which is, I mean, it's more than just about golf. You'll have to see it. Anybody who's not seen it,
Oh
I
yeah, you
strongly
got to
encourage
watch
it.
that. That is a
And
phenomenal
there's a little
show.
boy who Hardy is his name, and he observes what's going on. He's only a little fellow in the
Yeah.
and you've got Walter Hagen and Bobby Jones against each other, and he compares the two of them, and he said Bobby Jones was perfection with every shot.
Right.
Walter Hagen, however, well, he didn't say perfection. I'm putting that in. That's my own editorialization. But he said Walter Hagen did everything by the book. He was a picture of consistency, I think is more like what he says.
Yeah, that was
He
Bobby
said,
Jones.
That was Bobby Jones. Walter Hagen, on the other hand, he said, could make 3 crummy shots in a row, but knew that one brilliant one would save him every time.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. They were talking about the two because there was the I forget the name of that Matt Damon played, but he
Randolph Juna. I think
yeah, Juna.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So there was the threesome playing for this tournament, and Walter Hagen and Bobby Jones, and absolutely true. And the fascinating thing about that is that they were, at the end of the day. It was it really shows how much of a head game the thing really is.
Right.
The thing that is so beautiful about that is leadership. It's a head game.
Oh yeah.
You know.
So is fencing.
So
There's a lot of
so
it. Yeah.
just about everything. I think golf, baseball is golf. Pick one. Football is a head. They're all a head game. Life is a head game in the sense that you have to. See, attitude is everything. Now, what is attitude? Attitude is that I cannot necessarily control events, but I control how I process and utilize those events. That's what attitude is. What do I do with it? So, if I fail, okay, let's say I'm the last out tonight that loses the World Series for my team.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And I do it on an error or some stupid thing, right? So, make some bonehead move. I'm stressed or I just flat out screw up, whatever. Okay. What do I do with that?
Well, hopefully you learn from it.
Well,
I mean,
or do I go out and kill myself, right?
No.
I mean, and this is the bottom line that people don't seem to catch, is that things are going to happen, okay, and you have to understand that you look at that and say, okay, what am I going to do with it, okay? You see, there's a whole lot of difference between 30 years of experience and 1 year's experience 30 years in a row. And and that difference is that the person with 30 years experience has learned from the mistakes and does not make the old mistakes anymore, but keeps making new ones. you still make mistakes.
Right.
You just
Right,
make
right,
new
right,
ones. And instead of making the same old mistakes, the old thing that's attributed to Albert Einstein about insanity being doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different
Expecting
outcome.
a different result. Yeah.
And the reality is that if you are doing the same thing over and over again, you got to take a look at that and say, okay, what can I do to learn the lesson from this so that I can move past it? Because sometimes you're stuck until you learn the lesson. You literally can't get past it until you learn the lesson. Giving up is generally not a good option in most cases, unless you really are barking up the wrong tree, and that takes wisdom to do that. Now the difference, wisdom is the ability to make good decisions, and it's gained by making bad ones. And so, the bottom line to the whole thing is that's what you have to learn to do, is make these decisions, and then what happens. You learn from it, and then incorporate that in the next step, so that what you're really always looking for is the next step, the next step, the next step.
Right. Well, it's, and I look at it maybe the same way as looking at what is the desired end state. What is it you're aiming at?
Sure.
And this is what a CEO of a major corporation does. Okay. I worked for Coca-Cola also for a few years.
Yeah.
And the corporate agenda, let's just say.
Yeah.
It was not big.
Yeah.
It was not complicated.
No.
It was usually maybe between 3 and 5 goals that from January 1st until December 31st, what do we want to see on December 31st better than it currently exists on January 1st?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And it was always simple.
Sure.
And it
we
was,
want to
for
see
instance,
5% more sales or something.
Sales was usually a part of it, or maybe expansion in new territory.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was invariably there that they never seemed to get and never seemed to understand, or maybe they just didn't care, and this is what created friction at Coca-Cola when I worked there, was we've got to decrease turnover.
Yeah.
Every single year, and I worked there for 5 years in the
Sure.
90s, and anyway,
Yeah.
they never seemed to get it. I mean, and
Get it figured out, you mean.
They never seemed to figure out what the problems were.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I know, I mean, as an economist, and with an emphasis in labor, I knew what the answers were. And one time, I tapped the CEO. His name was Jack. He and I worked out together. Coke had this little thing. We'd have our little spin cycles and whatever.
Sure.
We were watching TV. I mean, I'd say for the first 2 months, I didn't even know who this guy was sitting next to me. But then somebody pointed it out and said, "Oh, by the way, that's the guy who's steering the ship around." I said, "Oh, this is great."
Yeah.
So I decided to bring it up to him in a very subtle way.
Yeah.
I say, I understand the turnover is a big problem here, and he went on with why, and I said, and I won't mention his name, but I said, really, I think that part of the problem is the direction we're going with benefits. They're getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
You have young folks here working. Young people, by their nature, will leave a job. Well, I don't understand why that's happening, and it really shouldn't happen. And at that point, he just blocked me out.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Refused.
Yeah. Well, and therein is the reason why the problem persists.
Yes.
See, the lack of humility. Humility being teachability. Okay, that's why the problem persists. Because as the leader, you've got to be teachable.
Right.
Because the
sure.
reality is that all of us are always smarter than one of us. And and of course, and I often say that if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room. But because I want to improve myself, you see, and so. But at the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. You've got to take a look at this and see, okay, what am I missing? How do I learn it? What do I do? To try something different. I don't know necessarily what the answer is going to be, but I know it's different.
Right.
So I'll do something different, and that I think might have a chance. And sometimes the answer is more obvious and clear, but often it's not. And so, just doing anything different, and then seeing what that does is at least exploring and looking in the right direction. So,
and yeah, you're right. And I wonder if they've ever learned their lesson there too, because every now and again I'll bump into somebody from Coca-Cola and whatever, and I'll say, well, how are things? I mean, you've got just to give you put numbers on the problem for you.
Yeah.
Turnover at Coke in the Intermountain West here, let's say, was 150%.
Yeah.
Meaning, not only was the guy working there on January 1st not going to be there on December 31st,
Right.
statistically speaking,
Yeah.
but half of the people you hired to replace that guy were going to be gone too.
Right.
That is a terrible number.
Oh, it is, and the problem with
and-
turnover is that the hidden costs are huge. They're enormous.
Oh, and there was no pretense. And this is another
Yeah.
thing. They made no pretense about it. They said, we hire a driver, let's just say arbitrarily. It costs us $1,500 to get him trained on a Class A commercial driver's
Right.
license so he can go around and deliver the product.
Yep.
Things like that. And a refusal to learn. What was it you just said there? One of us is always smart. Well, all of us are always smarter than one of us.
That's right.
And in the military, I never made a big decision like resource utilization vis-a-vis the mission.
No.
Without consulting with my higher-ranking NCOs.
Of course
the
not.
guys who are right there, the boots on the ground.
That's right.
What do you think of this? What are the odds of this happening? What is the most dangerous course of action? What is
Yeah.
the most?
Yeah.
What is the most
What's the
likely
down-
success?
Yeah. What's the
we're gonna have?
downside? What's the upside? All of that.
Right,
Yeah.
and this has to be factored in. And this is just a military issue, but it's
it's
an
just a
issue
good
of
decision
leadership
process
period.
anyway, yeah.
Right.
Well, see, here's the beauty. What you're doing, and this is part of the key to the whole process, because what you're doing is you're creating a relationship of trust, two-way trust, and they know that they can tell you where the bear is in the buckwheat, so to speak. Okay, and that you aren't going to get all tight-jawed, knickered in a twist about it, because it may be something that you are personally not up to snuff with. You know what I'm saying? They have that trust that you're really trying to make it better for the mission, make it better for them and everyone else.
Right, and in fact, just to bump over to the medical field, a doctor one time told me that when you're going through medical school, one of the things that they inculcate into you is know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, don't half-heartedly work with somebody's medical condition, or let's just say, just with half the information you need.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to do that. Don't
No.
even go down that road.
No.
But
No, there is one exception, and that's emergency situations. Okay, when we're in an emergency, we just have to take what we have available, what's available to us right then, and we have to act. And we have to act right now, because typically somebody's going to die or get seriously hurt, or something serious like that is going to happen. That is the only exception to this thing we're talking about here.
Right.
Other than that, that's not a good general practice. Unfortunately, too many so-called, and I call them so-called leaders because they're in a leadership position or whatever, but they really aren't good leaders. Too many so-called leaders think that that's their job, as they're a firefighter. They're always fighting fires. And the reality is, what they are is an arsonist. Okay, they're creating the fires for themselves to fight. And so at the end of the day, that's what so everything's an emergency, and I don't have to consult with anybody.
Right, it's continuous crisis management.
Of course it is.
What it
It's
is.
because they're the arsonist creating the crisis, and so that's the other little bit and piece that can come into this. And again, there are millions of examples of poor leadership and poor leadership practice. There are many fewer of good and great leadership. And so the idea is we want to kind of hone in on the great concepts and kind of eliminate as many of the negatives as we can. And as we do that, then we start getting to our goal. Again, what's the goal? I want to be a better leader tomorrow than I am today. And I want to be better today than I was yesterday, and so on, and better the next day than I am tomorrow. And so, listen, Tom, it has been an absolute plum-pleasing pleasure.
This has been fun.
And thank you. And people want to contact you or get in touch or anything. What do you have for us?
Well, if somebody wants to get in touch with me personally, they can go T Gandley, my line, TGANDLEY @ outlook.com. That's my email address.
Okay.
I'm a little apprehensive to put my phone number out there
Sure.
at the moment. I
need.
don't have an office, so I'm just going to leave tgandley@outlook.com.
Okay.
Or if they want to connect with me through Five Kingdoms Radio, that's fine. I have regular introductions and or regular pieces in Freedom's Herald. It's something that I'm working on right now. You know this.
Yeah.
And if there's any way to contact me or contact us through Brad Neufeld, same thing.
Sure.
And I'm always willing to talk because I take a lot. I am in the public forum on the internet beyond just Twitter and Facebook. And please, by all means, if you have any questions for me, military, it may have nothing to do with what we talked about today. I'm always happy to talk. I love it if it's advice. Just keep it decent, keep it friendly, and I'd love to hear from absolutely anybody. That'd be just great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, and so anyway, that's kind of a wrap for this one. And again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the flip side.